Hey, my name is Alex, aka Radio Runner on Instagram and online, and welcome to my YouTube channel where I help you guys learn how to become more effective artists. If you've been paying attention along with this series, you know that I am going through a series of virtual plein air paintings and walking you guys through my process. So we'll hop right in. We've already got the time lapse going. Unfortunately, I didn't have a screen recording. I keep losing them. But this is the same process that I have in all of my other videos. I start with a very loose line sketch of my reference, and then on multiple different layers, I will go in and add my flats. And that means my basic selections. So I have the sky, I have the mountains in the back, and I have the grass. And then on a layer in between the mountains and the grass, I go in and I add my building shapes. So this one was a countryside in Japan. Beautiful location. I did some editorializing with the cloud shapes and tried to idealize them. But some of the things that I want to point out is my choice to simplify the shape of the trees, as well as dealing with the strips of grass in the foreground. So on the trees, these were much more complex in the photograph. Instead, I tried to stylize them based on some artists that I like, people like Rob Ruppel and Alberto Miego, and they will simplify down to ovals and circles and simple shapes. If you want to paint in your trees, you can then, with a selection shape, like a circle, you can paint inside of it with a large textured brush and work your lights up. Once you do that, you can then eat away at the shape that you've made so that you can kind of imply leaves. And I found that works out pretty well. It's a quick and easier solution than painting out individual leaves and branches. For the grass in the foreground, I made selections where I wanted the darker grass, and then I used a brush and layered it on top. It's got some edges from its bristles, so I used that to imply grass overlapping on the lit grass, the yellowish. We're already more than halfway through this time lapse, unfortunately. More things are going on than I can keep up with, but in general, things that I've been doing, I am still doing here. For the mountains in the background, I am keeping in mind atmospheric perspective, and really only you see me using lighter colors where the peaks are, and then they kind of recede into a darker color to show that there's kind of a receding hill on these mountainsides. The clouds were a battle in this painting, and so not the best. I tried introducing yellow tones, but it ended up making the clouds look fairly sickly, and I tried to correct it a little bit, but it was a struggle. So here I'm going in and I'm detailing out the grass a little bit more. If you really want to finish a painting, some of the places that you need to focus on the most are going to be your foreground and the ground itself and your sky. My instructor, Kason Lamb, over at Brainstorm, he would tell us that all the time. He would say that you don't need to worry about your focal point if your ground is really good and your sky is really good, because those are often going to be major elements that take up a part of your image. So you want to make sure that those are pleasing compositionally and have details that kind of set into place the expectation of the world that you're in. To finish off the painting, I always go through with overlay and soft light layers, and so that I can add kind of that mood lighting, orange and blue tones to emphasize the light. And with that, we'll hop right into the second painting of the day. And this is a different change in color palette. It's a canyon. Now this one, I had actually used two references and I combined them to create, I guess, something sort of original. I liked the mountain shape that I'm creating the focal point for in this image, and then I used this large riverbed from another. So we're going to go through the same process on multiple layers. I'll set in my sky, my ground, and the different mountains. And you're going to see me working in the shrubbery here. I'm using just a basic kind of oily brush and implying shrubbery. Next, we're going to work on this focal, mountain shape. And you're going to see me be pretty abstract with those brush strokes. I'm only trying to add in textural and hue variation. Then I'm going to add form definition on a multiply layer, and that's where you see me add the dark shadow shapes. So I drew those in with the lasso tool in order to add form, and then using different kinds of brushes like a rake brush, I can go in and I can add that rock-like texture and flatten it out to a normal layer mode so that I can then paint it how I need to. If you're trying to juggle, overlay, soft light, multiply layers all for one thing, it can get really, really intrusive. So once you have your major lights and darks set up, it's not the worst idea in the world to flatten out to normal because you already have what you're going for. You're probably not going to change it again, especially when you're working quickly for an hour-long painting like these guys. And I'm following a similar process with the mountains in the foreground. I set up my brush stroke variation, and then on a multiply layer, I go in and I add in the shadow shapes. The places where cracks are coming out, the rock is receding, the light is not reaching, and then I will collapse those down together and turn them into a normal layer. You'll see that I copied all of the mountains, flipped them vertically, and duplicated them into what will be the waterbed area. And a fun tip is I like to use the motion blur setting instead of Gaussian blur to blur out reflections, because it adds a little bit of directionality rather than just indeterminately fuzzying out the image. I was quickly working along with these cloud shapes. In this one, the clouds are much more gestural. They had a lot of open space and I wanted to make them prominent. So I basically just painted in shapes and cut away into them, something that would express movement. And the final tip was I painted in a bunch of lines to have water reflections. And then using the distort tool, I projected that onto the river so that I didn't have to draw in all of those reflection peaks myself. And finally, with an overlay layer, add in some extra pizzazz to the focal point, and we can call it done. So thank you very much for hanging out, guys. That is going to be the last of the plein air paintings, and I'll catch you in the next one.